All right, so these are the pieces that I used to create a 90-degree corner. So I didn't do any bending. I've just got a single 4x8 sheet of 5/8 inch thick plywood that I ripped into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Nice barcode. So I got 6 slices that are about 16 inches wide. So that makes up the 8 feet. And they're mounted individually on these sort of framed sections. So if you look from the top, you can see that there's an angled cut on the framing. So I'm going to show you the formula I used to figure that out. And you'll also notice that the bottom also has the same angle. I used pressure treated wood, and for these sort of side pieces, these little studs, they've actually been ripped on a similar angle, so you can't really see it. That side's sort of buried against the plywood. But they're ripped on an angle so that they butt up against each other nice and flush, so that I can put a carriage bolt in between to lock them together. So yeah, I'll hop around just to show you what it looks like from the inside. It's not perfect, but I will tell you a thing or two that I figured out. Yeah, you can see there's like a really small gap. Could probably have fixed that a little more, but okay. All right, so let's get to the math here. So I've got a corner that's 90 degrees, and I know that I've got, I wanted to use 6 pieces because 6 times 16 gives us 96, which is an 8-foot length of plywood. So if we go ahead and divide this by 6, that gives us 15-degree angles. So that means that as we're turning these boards, we need about 15 degrees of rotation for each board. And because I'm cutting the angles evenly on either side of those top frames, I'm actually going to divide this again by 2, which gives us 7.5 degrees. And that's the angle actually that I used to make these cuts up here. So that this angle over here and this angle over here. And then same with this one here and so on. So that's 7.5 degrees. Add it all the way around, gives you 90 degrees. Now, if you wanted to use, 8 pieces, then you just do the same formula. You divide 90 degrees by 8, and then split the difference there, and that's the angle you'd use to make the cuts on your framing pieces. And I guess the other really important detail that I learned or wasn't thinking of was that so if your 16 inches is here on your plywood across, you've got to make sure that your framing member here is at least a fraction of an inch wider behind it, because it's sort of like a pie shape, and so this is kind of coming inward. So if you make your plywood as thick as this member here, they're not going to join nicely together. They're going to be, sticking out here and here at this sort of joint, and yeah, that's not a great looking one. But for this one here, right, if these guys came right out to the edge, flush out, the edges at the front would be bumping into each other, and you'd either need to do something to sort of smooth that out and kind of grind off the ends. But what I just did was I made sure that these pieces along the back were just slightly wider so that the front panels would fit together fairly nicely. Okay. All right, this is the last part I'll show you. So this funny looking thing is just a bunch of scrap from the garage that I used to make a jig. So for all those studs that go behind the corner pieces, in order to get them to go and butt up against each other nice and flush, I did the same rip by putting my 2x4 studs sort of right inside of this jig, and then setting a circular saw to the same angle. So my angle was 7.5 degrees, and just running it kind of across here and taking off, just taking off sort of an edge here. And it created these sort of like strips just like this, nice little trim pieces. But taking those off made sure that all those studs fit together nice and flush. So I'd highly recommend, if you're gonna be cutting, you know, 48 of these things or more, that you put together a little jig to make it a lot faster.